You've seen several ways to modify dynamically your component with viewChild, viewContent, and so on. In all those cases, those components should already exist in your views. However, for some scenarios, it could be really interesting to create the components in a completely dynamic way in runtime. This is what I'm gonna show you. To show you how to create dynamic components, I'm gonna use again the simple alert view component, but in this case, I'm gonna build it on runtime. Let me remove first some unnecessary stuff from this view. I can remove all those ng containers, this one from here also, and so do I with the alert view that is shown on time ended. This is the one I want to build dynamically, so it only remains the add timer alert view. Of course, I have to remove also some stuff on the component side. I don't need anymore this viewChildren decorator, as well as the this.alert.forEach, including also the change detection ref from here. I can remove it also from the constructor. And I can also remove the query list, viewChildren, and change detector ref imports. So finally, in the show and timer alert, I'm gonna comment this line from here, and here is where at some point I will show the alert that I am gonna build dynamically. If you check the results, everything should work fine, but no alert will be shown on timer end, because that's what I've just commented out, and this is the alert I want to create at runtime before displaying it. First of all, when you want to create a dynamic component, you need to specify to your module that this component is going to be generated in runtime. This way, Angular knows that it has to compile the component despite it is not explicitly included in any template. We will do this in app module by passing the component to the entry components property of the module metadata. This expects an array, and inside we include the simple alert view component. This way we are saying that the component will be needed in runtime, so Angular knows it must be compiled. The next step is to define a DOM element, where I'm gonna draw this component in a dynamic way. So here, after app alert view, I'm gonna create an empty div, and I set a template reference variable called alert. This way, I'll be able to find from code the element where I want to include my component. My template is okay now, but I need the reference to this element. From app component.ts, the same way I have a viewChild to get this time input element, I create a new viewChild for the alert I've just created on my template. This property will be called alertContainer, and it will be of type viewContainerRef. Of course, I have to import this class. We haven't talked yet about the viewContainerRef, but its main goal is to dynamically create components inside it. There's also another detail. ViewChild returns by default an element ref, so if you want to receive a viewContainerRef, you need to explicitly define this on the decorator. The viewChild decorator accepts another parameter, so I can pass an object with a read property, where I can set the type of the element I want to receive, like viewContainerRef. Now I have a reference to an element of the template of type viewContainerRef, and this is the place where I will create my dynamic component. But I need some tools to achieve this. The next step is to include the service component factory resolver. This is the class that allows to build any component at runtime. So in the constructor, I create a private resolver, whose type is going to be component factory resolver. And as always, I have to import the declaration. What I'm gonna do now is to create a factory of simple alert view components that will allow me to instantiate those elements inside the element referenced by alert container. I want to manipulate the content of the injected components right after inserting them into the view, so the lifecycle event to do so is the ng after content init. We have used in previous videos, but in case you forget, remember we added this interface to the class, so we have to implement the method. In first place, I create the factory with const alert factory, and I assign the value of this resolver. See that I have the resolve component factory method, and here I have to pass the component I want it to build, simple alert view component. Now I have a factory that allows me to create this component. However, I want a reference to the dynamic component, so I will save this in a new property called simple alert. I write my this.simpleAlert property. This does not exist yet, and I assign here this.alertContainer, the element where I'm gonna paint it of type viewContainerRef that has several methods. And I use the method createComponent, where I have to specify a component factory. So I use alert factory, that is the factory it will use to create a new component. So I have a factory and I have an element on my view where I'm going to create a new component based on this factory. And I will save the result in the simple alert property that I haven't created yet. Pay attention to the create component. It returns me a component ref of type simple alert view component. This is exactly how I need to declare this property. So above all, I create a public simple alert of type component ref, simple alert view component, set to null. Of course, I have to import the component ref. Now the code is not complaining because simple alert is well referenced. So at this point, I have the element created in my view, I have a reference to it, and finally in the show endtimer alert method, what I have to do instead of this comment is to display this runtime component. Using this.simpleAlert, this is a component ref, I can see there's different properties like change detector ref, component type, destroy host view, injector instance location on destroy. Instance is what returns me a simple alert view component. So using an instance of the component, I can call the show method the same way I previously did with this.alert.first.show. I can remove now this old comment, and finally, back to the browser, I can see the results again. I click play, and on countdown ends, it shows me a simple alert view. In this case, it displays an empty card, of course, because I have not specified any title or message yet. I'll show you how to do this on the next videos, but let me summarize first this lesson as it's pretty complex. First, I have created an empty div on my view. I have created also a template reference variable on this element, so from the TypeScript side, I can access the element using viewChild. At this point, I reference that element with alert container property, in this case of type viewContainerRef. I have to clarify this with the read property on viewChild arguments. I included also component factory resolved using dependency injection. And I've used ng-after-content-init to create a factory of simple alert view components. And then I've used the element referenced on my HTML, the viewContainerRef, in order to create a component based on my factory. I saved the reference to the newly created component, so later I can use it to get the instance and use their methods like .show. Remember also, I had to update AppModuleTS to tell Angular that simple alert view component is going to be created somewhere at runtime.